The words we just heard are words Jesus spoke to his friends at the Last Supper on the night before he died. He saw what was going to happen to him the next day, that he was going to suffer and die. But the folks at table with him, they didn't have a clue. They didn't see it coming at all. But even with all that was on his mind and in his heart, Jesus, at his Last Supper with his friends, takes time to pray over them. That's the prayer that Jeff just read for us in the gospel, Jesus' prayer. And part of Jesus' prayer here is a little confusing. On the one hand, he says, those who follow him don't belong to the world any more than he belonged to the world. And that the world will hate them just as it hated him. But on the other hand, he doesn't pray for them to be taken out of the world. As a matter of fact, he sends them into the world that hates them, the world they don't belong to. Let's not miss an important point here. Just as Jesus prayed over his friends on the night before he died, so does he pray over us, you and me, sitting here at the table of the Last Supper, which this altar is in St. Zepherin Church. And he sends us out into the world we don't belong to, the world that hates us. Well, how are we going to do that? And another question is, which world are we talking about? Consider how many worlds you and I live in. We live in the world of our families, the world of our neighborhoods and our town. We live in the world of our parish. We live in our work world, our school world, the American world. We live in the global world, the global village. We live in the world of our hopes and dreams. We live in a very public world, and we live in the private world of our own thoughts and feelings. Indeed, don't we sometimes say that we're lost in our own world? We live in a physical world and in a spiritual world. We live in a world of belief and doubt, of surety and uncertainty, of insight and confusion. We live in so many different worlds, some of which overlap rather neatly, and some of which are in conflict with one another. And of course, we live in God's world. We were created to live in God's world. The world of God's making, the world of God's love, the world of God's Spirit, the world God gave us to tend and to nurture and to develop. So, of all the worlds that I live in which of my worlds do I spend the most time? Which of the worlds I live in demands and draws most of my energy and attention, most of my interest and my affection, most of my time, my blood, my sweat, and my tears? Whatever world that is that the world I truly want to be my primary world? The world I really want to live in? The world I want to call my home? And what happens when the different worlds I live in are at odds with one another, or when they collide? That's when we enter the world of confusion, even chaos. And this can easily happen when we choose worlds of our own creation and desire, worlds in conflict with the world of the life of God. And it's when we opt for our own world over God's, it's then that we enter the world of sin. Well, I don't want to leave us there. And neither does Jesus. At the Last Supper, Jesus gave his friends, I think, 2 hints that can help us define and choose wisely the best world to live in. The first hint he gives, he speaks about joy. He says he wants us to have the fullness of his joy. Now, many of the worlds in which you and I live promise us joy and happiness and contentment and fulfillment. But often, even more often than not, many of the worlds we live in can't and don't deliver what they promise. They leave us disappointed. They leave us empty-handed, empty-hearted. They leave us empty. So one way of discovering the best world in which to live is to work at discerning which of my worlds brings me the greatest joy. True joy, lasting joy, joy that feeds my soul and lifts my spirit. How about if we took a moment right now and just each of us ask ourselves, in the last week, in the last month, when did I experience the greatest joy? Where was I? What was I doing? What was my joy? In which of my worlds did I find my greatest joy? The world that brings me the deepest and most abiding joy will be the world I was created to live in, and you too. After speaking about joy, Jesus offers the second hint about living in this world. He speaks of truth. In fact, he says, I consecrate you in truth. At the Last Supper, Jesus prays that his friends know the truth, that they seek the truth, that they come to know the difference between what's true and what's false. And consider the importance of this for us today. We live in an era of fake news. We live in a world of fake news. And fake news brings no joy. We live in a time when we need to discern what news is true and what news is intentionally false. We need to survey the different worlds we live in to discover where does the truth live, to discern what's true, what's wise, what leads us in directions that prove to be healthy, wholesome, rewarding, honest, just, fair. Given the number and complexity of all the worlds you and I live in, we might do well to pray just for the desire to seek the truth, to know the truth, the desire to find and accept and live by the truth. Well, I think it stands to reason, it's even logical to conclude that the world in which we find the wisdom of truth and deep and lasting joy, that will be the world which is of God and in which God calls you and me to live. So one more time, let me ask, of all the worlds I live in which of my worlds do I spend the most time? Which of my worlds demands and draws most of my attention and energy, my interest, my affection, my time, my blood, my sweat, and my tears? Which of my worlds leads me closer to truth and brings me my deepest joy? Just as Jesus prayed over his friends at the Last Supper, prayed that they find both truth and joy, so does he pray exactly the same for us and over us gathered here this evening. And as Jesus prays over us, how about if we pray for one another? Pray that each of us and all of us be drawn to seek and to find the truth, the joy, and the peace that is only found in the world of Jesus.